Welcome to the world united. Welcome to the world united.
Our next speaker is Professor Abe Abrahami. Professor Dr. Rabai, he's a Dean CEO of Battery University. Abe serves as an engineer, project manager, business analyst, consultant, and therapist, scholar in residence. He's a trainer and lecturer for about 45 years. He has covered numerous fields such as energy, IT management, quality assurance, compliance, Judaism, mysticism, natural health therapies, psychology, counseling, and much more. As a mentor, he has inspired thousands of people around the world. Abe has spoken in over 20 countries and delivered hundreds of presentations on land and on a cruise ship. He has published 80 plus papers, including 3 award winners and 4 books. So Abe combines all the disciples he studied in his dynamic, mind-provoking fashion. The knowledge behind the knowledge is one of his lectures. Abe lives in UK and comes from Israel originally. So your topic today, Abe, is Tabernacles Festival of Global Peace. Thank you so much, Abe. Over to you.
Yeah, welcome, Professor Abe Abraham. So what I want to introduce as Professor Abe Abraham is also a rabbi, wonderful, very well-learned scholar. Over to you, Abe.
Thank you very much for this illustrious presentation, introduction. I hope I can live up to it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. My first name is Abraham, but I cut it short to Abe, not Abe. The reason is that people get confused with my first name and surname, but be it as it may. Thank you very much, Dr. Yugandhar, for inviting me to speak. Much appreciated. And I know it's a very big undertaking, so I'd like to thank you and all your volunteers and staff. To put such an event is a complicated and demanding project, so we don't underestimate it, although of course there are always some hiccups which we must accept. It's part of life. So thank you very much again. And I'd like to say thank you for the singers. It was a very good and inspiring introduction. And perhaps if we sing more like this, we'll have more mutual understanding between different people and the people in the environment. I'd like to say a few words about the recent festival of Tabernacles, which we celebrated, the Jewish people, and with the rest of the world. And I'll explain in a moment what I mean by that. We recently had before the Festival of Tabernacles, we had the Days of Awe, we had the Day of Atonement, we had the Jewish New Year, which is the Universal New Year. According to our traditional verifiable records, we are now 5781 from Adam and Eve, which does not preclude other creations and pre-civilizations. But be it as it may, that's what we celebrated. Now, what is Tabernacles? First of all, when the Jewish people, the children of Israel, or Jacob, the 12 tribes, left Egypt after numerous miracles and the famous 10 plagues. Incidentally, there are many more than 10. The text talks about the main 10 plagues, but the others. And many miracles in the desert, 40 years of journey. They had to go to school, basically. It was difficult to get them to a maturity level where they could inherit the land of Canaan, which became later the land of Israel. So they had to go through school for 40 years to get up to the level, as it were. They also stopped in the Sinai desert in a place called Sukkot, which is Tabernacles. And after some rest, they carried on. They had in total 42 journeys. Then, of course, we had a tabernacle, the tent of covenant in the singular, which was a folding tent with all the ceremonies that took place, the sacrifice in the desert and so on. until King Solomon built the temple about 1,000 years before the Common Era. It was destroyed by the Babylonians 576 years later or thereabout. Then it was destroyed second time by the Romans in the year 70 after the Common Era. So what is all this celebration? Now, although in the prayer books that we have, we pray a lot of world peace, people have this mistaken impression that the Jewish people are insular. We are insular so far as our culture and tradition, religion is, like most people are. You find wherever you go in the world, English people stick with English, French with French, because they have common tradition, common culture, common language. So from that point of view, we are like everybody else. But when it came to the temple, it was something unbelievable. And the reason why I say that is that the building of the temple, although primarily was done by King Solomon, Hiram, the king of Tzor, what is Lebanon today. We had very good relationship with them then. And please God, we'll have very good relationship with them again in the near future. But the thing is that Tabernacle is unique. This festival, but we celebrate in the temple for 8 days. And the reason why I say that is that the temple was an international project. And why do I say that? Most people don't realize it. Materials, expertise, artisans were received from Alexandria, from Egypt, from Lebanon of today, from other parts. After the temple was built, nations of the world and royalty came to visit. Of course, the Jewish people had the obligation to visit 3 times a year. And if they couldn't, they had to send an emissary on their behalf. But many non-Jews actually came to the temple. They brought gifts. They watched the ceremonies from the place where they were allowed to. We had different parts of the observation post, shall we say. And it was a most amazing event. Furthermore, the prophets tell us, and this is something they don't teach, the clergy don't teach the world population. If you read Isaiah particularly, he's the most quoted prophet in many, many texts. But of course, there are others. Isaiah says in more than one place that it's not nice to have, but it's an obligation. It's incumbent upon the nations of the world to help the Jewish people, not only when the temple existed, which they did, but after the temple was destroyed, it's part of the project to rebuild the temple. The idea basically here, it's not just a most beautiful building. We had amazing buildings, Indian temples, Christian temples, Asian temples, Buddhist temples, amazing gold and all the rest of it. But the temple signified some unification of all the forces from Jerusalem to the world and vice versa, inner to Jerusalem. Now, at the time of the temple, we brought, as the text says in the books of Chronicles and the book of Kings, we brought numerous sacrifices. In particular, we brought 70 sacrifices on behalf of the nations of the world. Now we are in the Torah reading portion, the 5 books of Moses. We read the story about Noah and the flood. The flood occurred several thousand years ago, this Hebrew month of Cheshvan. And the idea basically was that the Jewish people, as Isaiah said, have to be a light unto the nations. The problem is we are all flesh and blood. We all make a lot of mistakes. Everybody, Jews, non-Jews, we are united in this. But the idea basically was to be a light unto ourselves. And that means not just for the Jewish people, for everybody. So before we preach about the environment, about brotherly love, sisterly love, and all the rest of it, we have to act in a personal fashion likewise. So when people talk about the environment, preserve the environment, which is something we all support, we all agree about, we may differ on the ways that we like to do that, but the objective, the end result, the goal is synonymous with perfection and harmony. So the tabernacle, which we celebrated recently, was basically a temporary tent We had a roof which was with gaps. You could see the stars, you could see the sun, you can see the rain, and but it was covered from four sides. It interfaced like a grill. It interfaced with, I don't mean a cooking grill, I mean a grill with gaps, like air conditioning grill, yeah? Interface with the rest of the world, while at the same time it had some partition. But it signifies that the Jewish people have to interface with everybody else, and everybody else have to interact with somebody else. So when we talk about tabernacles, we have to remember that when we go out of the comfort of the house in the month preceding the winter, in the autumn, which already is getting cold and rainy, we are making a statement to the Almighty that we've accepted the commandment to go out of our comfort zone and take faith in the Almighty, in His promise. And if it's obviously raining and cold, we can't be outside. We come back to the house. But generally speaking, that's the idea of interfacing with nature. Now, when we talk about the environment, Tabernacle emphasizes the integration of humanity with the environment. We are very close to the environment. We live outside of our home, but we also interface with the environment because we have a close contact with it. So when we cut trees unnecessarily, unauthorized, illegally, when we dig mines or drill for oil, all things which are needed for civilization. I've been lecturing on mining and oil and gas for many years. We need all that until such time we find alternatives. And we are now, I would say, halfway through. In a recent lecture about the outlook for energy by the year 2050, I predicted that in several decades, all these primitive forms of fuel will all but disappear. So when we talk about destroying forests, destroying the environment for material gains, very short-lived material gains, we destroy part of our body. I mean, really our own body. So if you take a person, if you cut, God forbid, his or her finger, they can still live, but it's uncomfortable, right? If you cut the arm, they can still live, but it's more uncomfortable and painful, and so on and so forth. By cutting nature, we are cutting limbs from ourselves. And what is the proof? It's very simple. I was watching a documentary where experts in Africa went to the African forest to check for the Zika virus. And the guy who's got his job, full-time job, he's got a tower in the middle of the African forest. At different levels, there are different mosquitoes. One of them is the Zika virus mosquito, which infects people. And he has to daily write a report at which level of the tower there are different types of mosquitoes. And as we continue to cut into the forest to create farming, to create ranches, to grow cattle and all the rest of it, those viruses that were hidden hitherto in the forest are now being released. They are leashed out like Pandora box. So this connection with nature is so obvious. What I don't understand is why the nations of the world, the heads of states, can't see this as a major issue, and prevention is by far better than cure. Now, we know that those people who commit those acts, in many cases, if they don't do that, they will starve to death because they have no way of making a living. So the idea here is to bring harmony and to bring this tabernacle of peace between us and the environment, is for government to act and solve the problem from its root causes, rather than just send forest rangers to catch these people. And what are they going to do with them? They're going to put them in prison, and then they go out and do it again. They're going to give them fines, which probably they cannot pay. So we are in a catch-22 situation here. The message here, if we want to live in a tabernacle of peace, not just amongst us, Jews and non-Jews and all nationalities and all religions, we have to live in peace with the environment. Instead of saying we're going to conquer the environment, the language itself is already aggressive. we're going to conquer space. Can we really conquer space? Ask yourself the question. Can we conquer the bottoms of the sea? What we have discovered is a fraction of what is at the bottom of the sea, or indeed in outer space. Instead of using the word to conquer, we should use the word to live in harmony, to integrate with God's creatures, whether aliens, whether they are fish, whatever they are, whether they are mosquitoes. We should learn to integrate with everything else around it. And of course, it's easier said than done. Now we are in the middle of a pandemic, a terrible pandemic, which was leashed upon us. And in Judaism, we don't believe in coincidence. There is no such a thing as coincidence in Judaism. We believe in the action and reaction, one of the 3 laws of Newton, right? If you do something, you get an equal and opposite reaction. Sometimes the reaction is muted due to the mercy of the Almighty. Sometimes the reaction is far worse, all depending on our behavior. But we have to learn now to live with masks. What does it mean? We have to shut up, basically. We have to stop slandering each other. We have to stop the evil tongue. We have to stop abuse of social media and causing many youngsters to take their lives because of bullying. Yeah, Tabernacle is about bringing us together. And everybody heard the story about a guy who wants to commit suicide, and he's in his boat with everybody else, and he's drilling a hole. So the passengers turned around to him and said, "Are you crazy?" So he said, "I want to kill myself." But the passengers turn around to him and say, "You know what? If you do that, we also go down with you." So we have to create this idea of consciousness that every action or reaction on an individual level has very serious consequences. I recently, and before recently, I lectured and wrote about money laundering. It's a big subject. Now, both environmental terrorism and real life terrorism, taking somebody's life because he doesn't agree with us because our way of life or belief system is different to his, is only sponsored and can only exist because of money funneled by money laundering and other heinous crimes. So if you want to stop terrorism, it's all very well sending the army to find and punish them, but the money keeps flowing and financing the sources of terrorism. The way to stop terrorism is to stop terrorism financing, to stop money laundering, human trafficking, human slavery, drug trafficking, and everything that goes with it. But you know who finances all this? It's the financial terrorists, the banksters, the crooks who have connections in high places. And those people in high places avoid justice because they're so influential. What they cannot see is by their actions, they cause so much grief to the rest of the world. And God forbid, if one of the family members is impacted by an act of terrorism, maybe it brings the point home that money laundering is not such a good thing, and it's only for short-term gains. In the end, the whole economy suffers from money laundering. Tabernacle of Peace means that we all living on the same roof. If we don't play according to the rules of justice, not only somebody else is going to be hurt, but we ourselves are going to be hurt. And the only question is sooner or later, and by how much. So what we need, the pandemic has caused us businesses to fall, sadly individuals to die, to become ill, and many, many other calamities. And we are, by a long shot, not out of it. And even if we find a vaccine at the end of this year, beginning of next year, we may have to live with this for a very long time, take all the precautions necessary. The Almighty, nature, if you like, whatever your belief system, is restricting us now due to the pandemic, so we cause less damage to others and to the environment. This is a clear message. The question is, are we learning the lessons? I doubt it, because at the moment, human behavior, unfortunately, does not indicate that we've learned much from the pandemic. If you look at fraud, cyber terrorism, fraud on the internet, all people being called, the money is scammed and stolen from them, All these kind of things that are going around the world indicate to me that we haven't learned that much, but I'm an optimist. I believe when push comes to shove, in the end, we will realize there is no way out of it except self-correction. And I just want to finish with this story. You probably heard this before. A guy comes to his clergy and he says, "Sir, I want to correct the world. I want to go out and preach goodness and kindness and all the rest." So the clergy says to him, "By all means, go ahead, son." And he goes and he comes back some time later, and he said, "You know, it's too hard." So the clergy said to him, "Listen, son, work on your country." So he goes down, goes out, come back, and he says, "Sir, it's too hard, can't do it." So the clergy said to him, "Work on your city." So he goes out, same thing. He said, "Work on your community." He does the same, he comes back, he said, "Too difficult, people are not listening." So the clergy says to him, "Work on yourself. Work on yourself, because if you work on yourself, you will project goodness and positiveness, and as a result, you will infect people not with a deadly virus, but with a virus of life, a good virus." And the same thing goes with change management. If you try to change the whole organization, it's not going to work. Work on yourself first. Change something in the way you work and become a center of excellence. And I think if we all take this message and do whatever we can personally, I think we will get to the stage that eventually we'll connect all the dots of self-correction, goodwill, and we get to a state where we are really able and willing to have our final redemption, global peace, no wars, no pandemics, and live in harmony with each other, which is really not that difficult. Because at the end of the day, this is the only way to live. And all other ways we've tried for thousands of years, wars, empires, vampires, whatever you want. We tried it all and it's all failed. And it all comes to the basic premise. Don't do unto others what you don't do, what you don't want done unto you. And this is a very simple message. And God willing, if we go by this principle, it's a very simple principle, difficult to keep, yeah? If we put away the greed, the lust, and all the rest of it, and consider others, both in the short, medium, and in the long term, we will realize tremendous benefits and really have a wonderful and peaceful life. And please God, we will see the improvement in our behavior and receive our final redemption, not just in a spiritual sense, but very much in a physical sense, that we live in harmony with nature, in a true paradise, and keep God's promise to us as we are entitled to, but we have to work a little bit harder together. Thank you very much. God bless you all.